Security head.
Antivirus and EDR solutions tricked into becoming data wipers. TSA to expand facial recognition across America, and Uber hit with another breach after vendor attack. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Jeremy Embalabala, the CISO at Hub International. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here.
Got to be here, Rich.
Before we move on, we got to thank our sponsor, Fortra, your cybersecurity ally. Remember to join us on YouTube Live. To do so, just go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. It's the third one down. Count it out. Just click on it to join us. We won't wait for you, though. We've got about 20 minutes, so let's hop to it. Antivirus and EDR solutions tricked into act as data wipers. A security researcher, Or Yair from SafeBreach, has found a way to exploit the data deletion capabilities of widely used endpoint detection and response and antivirus software from people like Microsoft, SentinelOne, Trend Micro, Avast, and AVG to turn them into data wipers. The goal of the research was to exploit existing security tools to remove the need for a threat actor to be a privileged user. Abusing EDRs and AVs for data wiping, good way to bypass security defenses, as the file deletion capabilities of security solutions are expected behavior and likely be missed, at least right now. Jeremy, the specifics of this trick involve, kind of the classic weak link. Yair showed that when an EDR deletes a malicious file, it first identifies the file as malicious and then deletes it. So, the trick is to insert something between those two events. Is this cause for concerns for CISOs?
Yeah, it is. I mean, endpoint has always been, specifically endpoint has been a game of cat and mouse between the threat actors and defenders. Relative to the birth of antivirus EDR solutions, ransomware protection and containment controls, those features in these platforms are relatively new. And abuse of legitimate application capabilities is on the rise versus as a preferred vector versus kind of exploitation of a vulnerability in the software. So I think that should make it relatively easier for vendors to remediate, both on the OS side with mitigating controls or on the endpoint OEMs. Something to watch out for, but it should be a little bit easier for folks to fix.
All right, our next story here, TSA to expand facial recognition across America. The TSA has been testing facial recognition software in 16 airports to automatically screen passengers flying across the country. It is now looking to roll it out nationwide next year. Flyers will be able to pass through security checkpoints by scanning a copy of a government-issued ID, something like a driver's license, maybe something stored on a mobile phone, and matching that to a live photo of their face. Jeremy, facial recognition sits on the horns of a big dilemma. On the one hand, trying to ensure safe and timely flights. Nobody wants to stand in line. Everyone wants to get verified quickly. But a whole bunch of very legitimate issues around privacy and accuracy. A lot there. I'm curious, what are your feelings about this nationwide rollout?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around this type of technology. And I think we're going to continue to see the proliferation of biometrics, particularly in these public safety and law enforcement settings. There are legitimate use cases for this technology, and they can make a positive impact on our communities. But there's also big risks related to data privacy, abuse of the capabilities, et cetera. And that's something we got to balance. And I think this is a polarizing topic for people, especially as we think about certain foreign governments who use these types of technology capabilities to the extremes as a way of monitoring and suppressing freedom. But it's important that these risks are managed. And when these technologies are used, that appropriate oversight and controls are put into place. And then we strike a balance in where and how they're used.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the issues here, especially around the privacy and stuff, would be mitigated to a certain degree. Obviously, there's always going to be people that feel uncomfortable with this for a variety of, again, very legitimate reasons. But if these systems are transparent in the way they're handling, processing, storing the data, the fear, I think, is that this is a giant Easter egg for someone to do some harm. And if there's transparency in how that's processed in a way that, okay, we can see that reasonable controls are being taken, at least in theory, I feel like that perhaps mitigates a lot of the fears that people might have on this, or concerns at least.
Yeah, it has less to do with the technology itself and more of the application of technology. That's really the question that has to be answered.
All right, well, next up here, Uber hit with another breach after attack on a third-party vendor. Uber has suffered a sensitive data leak as a result of cybercriminals gaining access to the AWS backup server of their third-party vendor, Tectivity. Data leaked on a dark web forum appears to include source code associated with mobile device management platforms used by Uber, Uber Eats, and third-party vendor services. Operating under the pseudonym Uber Leaks, very creative, the threat actors created 4 separate posts on a dark web forum, each attributed to a different member of the infamous Lapsus hacking group. Jeremy, this is not the first time we've heard about hackers getting into a company by leveraging third-party vendors through AWS or any number of cloud providers. It's got that kind of plain text password on GitHub vibe to it, at least in this case. I'm curious, what's your take on this most recent Uber breach?
Yeah, I mean, these stories shouldn't be surprising anymore. I remember, when the Target one happened, and that was kind of the big thing that everybody talked about. But I mean, there shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, customer and employee data breaches are, or the fact that it occurred through a compromise of a third party vendor shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's a great reminder that third party risk management needs to be a core part of any mature security program. Depending on the scope and nature of the vendor relationship, CISO should be just as equally concerned about vulnerabilities and security maturity of the third parties they do business with as their own estates. You can't, you're never going to be able to eliminate the risk, but it can be meaningfully reduced and managed.
I'll just put a big fat plug out there for Super Cyber Friday. We were just talking about this on there, so you can look for the highlight reel coming out on next week on that at CISOseries.com. Because yeah, that's definitely top of mind or it should be for CISOs out there for sure.
Right.
Our next story here, Royal Ransomware uses novel encryption. The Royal Ransomware gang has been making quite a name for itself recently, basically taken, in terms of volume or level of threat, right up there with people like Lockbit. Now, a new report from Cybereason looks at its use of partial encryption. Certainly not a new tactic, but Royal has expanded on it with flexible percentage encryption designed for specific targets. So not just a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services warned last week of Royal targeting healthcare providers, but this report from Cybereason found the group basically operating across many regions and industries. Jeremy, it's suspected that Royal is made up of former Conti member affiliates. I guess my question is it an improvement on partial encryption? Is this a significant threat? And how can organizations prepare to defend against it before it happens?
Yeah, this is a significant threat, as this is going to, this is an attempt here to kind of evade existing controls. This is some more great work by our friends over at Cybereason. Love what those guys are doing. This story is another great example of the cat and mouse game between threat actors and security OEMs. And what Royal is really doing here is trying to optimize their operations. These are enterprises now, criminal enterprises. So the whole switch from this from full to partial file encryption in an effort to evade detection and speed up encryption is really what they're trying to do. It's all an effort to maximize their ROI through operational efficacy enhancements and maximizing revenue by being more prescriptive about their target selection. I
Well,
think.
And
I was
it
gonna
also
say, go ahead.
reminds me of the antivirus, just on a technical level, where it's all about trying to get that IO kind of under your detection threshold, whether it's
Right.
through a trusted service like antivirus or whether it's through we're just going to reduce the volume and still break all your files anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly right. And it's going to be up to again the defenders on the OEM side, the EDR makers, the AV makers, to really use intelligence and heuristics to kind of detect build in controls for these tactics and be able to detect them a little bit quicker. And it's just a game for them to kind of maximize things here. And it's like perhaps Royal hired management consultants. I mean, that's going to be a new vertical in the cybercrime ecosystem.
The more you learn about the background, I mean, it's all of those like Conti leaks and stuff like that. You realize like these are cyber criminals. But they increasingly just sound like regular businesses, just with nefarious means and arguably no oversight. So
Yeah, this sounds like people with MBAs.
yeah. Oh no, they've gotten to cybercrime. All right. Well, before we move on, we want to, of course, spend a few moments with our sponsor, Fortra. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at fortra.com. That's FORTRA.com. Hackers target Japanese politicians with new MirrorStealer malware. A hacking group tracked as MirrorFace has been targeting Japanese politicians for weeks before the House of Councilors election in July 2022 using a previously undocumented credential stealer named MirrorStealer. The campaign was discovered by ESET, whose analysts report that they could piece together evidence thanks to operational mistakes made by the hackers that left traces behind. The hackers deployed a new information stealing malware along with the group's signature backdoor load info, which communicated with a C2 server known to belong to APT10 infrastructure. Jeremy, it's always nice to hear stories about the times bad guys make mistakes, not just the one-off that lets the bad guys in. Should this type of forensic analysis be factored into the busy schedules of a company's internal security team, or is it just too much extra for their plates?
No, 100%. It's something that you've got to take a look at. I think that both enterprise SOC teams, as well as security product OEMs and law enforcement folks, need to be disseminating this type of intel and learning from these attackers. And this is a great opportunity for the security community to observe and learn about these tactics for a specific known threat actor group, and for them to kind of shift tactics away and kind of rebuild their infrastructure and the way they operate. That's a big lift for them. So it's some great insight to how we could potentially stop and detect these types of things from this group a little bit earlier. In this case, they were sloppy. They were sloppy on the operational security side, OPSEC, and that led to this particular campaign getting blown up.
Next up here, Lego BrickLink, bug. Let's just start with that real quick here. Lego BrickLink bug lets hackers hijack accounts and breach servers. This is something more painful than stepping on a piece of Lego in bare feet. Security analysts have discovered 2 API security vulnerabilities in BrickLink.com, Lego Group's official secondhand and vintage marketplace for Lego bricks. This was discovered by Salt Security, first as a cross-site scripting flaw in the Find Username dialog box of the coupon search section. Then a second flaw was located on the Upload to Wanted list page, where users can upload an XML of lists containing Lego parts they wish to find and purchase. Of course, both these vulnerabilities could lead to a theft of members' personally identifiable information, and both are exploiting otherwise useful input windows on a form, a classic injection technique. The form has a clear and obvious use. Jeremy, my question, is this an example of an attack that really should have been proactively defended against, as compared to, kind of our first story where Ord Yair was creative in kind of figuring out, the weak link of it to that, leading to that exploit? Isn't this one kind of a textbook case of protecting any data input window?
It really is. I mean, this shouldn't have happened. I've heard a lot of people debate in recent years around, is OWASP top 10 even relevant anymore? I think the answer is a resounding yes. This is a good example of that. This is just another example of critical vulnerabilities that could have led to PII exposure from basic cross-site scripting and injection attacks. That I think as we move up the kill chain and we move up the kind of the layers of our applications and our technology stack, controls and our talk track tends to focus there. And if you forget about the basics, it doesn't matter how much you invest in cutting edge technology or innovative controls, but if you neglect those, it's all for naught. Fortunately in this case, or maybe unfortunately, depending on who you are, how you look at it, researchers found this first. I think that obviously they would have liked to find this, their own internal teams find it first, but fortunately it hadn't been exploited that we know of.
Next up here, Crooks use HTML smuggling to spread QBot malware through SVG files. Researchers at Talos have uncovered a phishing campaign that distributes QBot malware using a technique that leverages scalable vector graphics or SVG images embedded in HTML email attachments. HTML smuggling, as it's known, is a highly evasive technique for malware delivery that leverages legitimate HTML5 and JavaScript features. Malicious payloads are delivered through encoded strings in an HTML attachment or web page, and the malicious HTML code is generated within the browser on the target device, which is already inside the security perimeter of the victim's network. This again, kind of a new take on a technique of hiding malware inside graphic image files, but unlikely most people will even think of this type of threat as they, click through an email attachment. I'm curious, Jeremy, what can be done in these kind of situations?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's not very often that you see this type of sophisticated payload delivery. It's not something that is highly focused on from a defense standpoint, and probably not a lot of people and a lot of controls are looking for something like this. I mean, the whole point of this delivery technique here is to evade security tooling. That's why they're doing this the way they're doing it. It's the reason why defense in depth is important, and controls like blocking password protected zips or specific content types that may not seem to be effective or worthwhile on their own. But if you can limit those delivery vectors that can be exploited, and those methods that can be abused that are not necessary for business operations or for enabling or supporting a defined business process, then maybe it's worth the hassle to turn those things off, and maybe it's worth the inconvenience.
Jeremy, do you think this is kind of a knock-on effect of Microsoft blocking macros? Just threat actors have to get more creative, so they're looking at things that we've seen theoretical exploits on, now trying to use this for for actual spreading malware.
Yeah, it's just moving from one kind of business functionality to the other, and they're looking for vectors that everybody's using, and maybe you're not worried about it. When macros started being abused way back, this is going back to the early days. Nobody ever thought about that as something that could have been malicious, and that turned out to be kind of a big thing, and it's still a thing, to be honest with you, because you can't really get rid of those things. In this case, there's some things you can do as far as mitigating controls. You could potentially block SVG files. You could block password protected zips, and limit your exposure to these types of attacks.
All right. Well, our last story here, InfraGard data for sale on the dark web. Kind of one of the more interesting stories this week. Security researcher Brian Krebs reported that the user database for the U.S. FBI's InfraGard program appeared for sale on a cybercrime forum on December 10th. The program was designed to build information sharing partnerships between the FBI and private firms, including operators of critical infrastructure. Krebs contacted the seller, who said they obtained access by creating a new InfraGard account, posing as the CEO of a major U.S. financial corporation. Krebs is extremely specific, basically saying it's one of the credit firms, but can't say it out loud. I really enjoyed that in his piece. The seller said that they used a fake email, but listed the actual CEO's phone number in the application. The impersonated CEO was contacted, and they said the FBI never contacted them by phone to verify the application. The dataset mostly reveals emails and phone numbers, not like the end of the world, but it also allows for direct messaging other InfraGard members, opening the door to potential social engineering, especially with what would be presumed to be a trusted channel. So, Jeremy, maybe a few embarrassed Zoom meetings going on at the FBI this week with more than a few members using the words, "Have we been pwned?" in the chat window. Krebs' story looks like InfraGard got a lesson in social engineering. It's always difficult for the rest of us to live with that. After all, I guess if the FBI can get taken in, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Yeah, this one is really sad. I mean, it hits home. It's a bit embarrassing when this happens, on kind of the cyber defender law enforcement side. It's just something that, it's just, salt in the wound for the community. In this case, there was no technical compromise. This is really a breakdown in the InfraGard membership application and vetting process. It's actually tricked the FBI into approving a membership application using information of a CEO of a major financial firm. And, they end up harvesting the data through legitimate APIs and some simple scripting. So, I mean, it really goes to show that excuse me, that nobody's immune. And, basic process breakdown, some potentially risky capabilities should be looked at. Again, you can invest in all types of controls, but if you have bad process, you're gonna get owned.
Yeah, and Steven, our YouTube live stream said InfraGard seems to have lacked the basics of API sec and fundamentals of DataSec. 87,000 records lost. Yeah, definitely, Steve, definitely agree with you. And thanks to everybody that's been commenting during the show. Really good stuff. Remember, you can join us on YouTube Live. Good stuff, though. Before we get out of here, Jeremy, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you? Just something you reacted strongly to today?
Yeah, this was a good week of stories. I would say this last story on InfraGard, that was really the eye roller for me.
Yeah.
That was good work by Krebs. So it was interesting, but again, sad for the community, and we've got to do better.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Jeremy Embalabala, the CISO at Hub International, thank you so much for being on the show, bringing the good takes. Very fun having you on the show. Where can people find you online if they're so inclined to give you a follow?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and thanks for having me, Rich. Appreciate it.
Excellent. And is Hub International hiring, and where can people check that out?
We are hiring. And I checked. We have 8 open roles on the security and compliance teams. We had 9. We're filling roles. So always looking for good talent.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. And thank you also to our sponsor, Fortra. your cybersecurity ally. Remember, there will be no Super Cyber Friday next week, as it will be preempted globally by Super Santa Friday. Nor will there be a week in review show next week, as the entire team will be standing around the CISO Series Festivus poll, airing our many grievances, and there will be grievances. However, you will still be able to get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We will get you all caught up. And remember, now you can also subscribe to the show through our newsletter on LinkedIn. There you can read and hear the show right from the newsletter. Just go to the CISO Series page on LinkedIn to subscribe. Until next year, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.